Hey there, writing workshop. Happy day 13. A group obviously gets to do this lesson with me in class. B group, you guys are doing this virtual, and then we'll flip-flop halfway through the week here. As for our journal today, you'll notice that I asked you about a time when you've gotten in an argument with someone. You could write about a really serious argument. You could write about a silly one. Doesn't really matter. The topic of argument and persuasion is going to be important in our second lesson video this time around. This will be one of those lessons that has two smaller video components. It's one of those mini lesson days where it's mini lesson 1, then a break, then mini lesson 2. Let's get right into mini lesson 1. You'll notice here, our first objective is to use colons correctly in writing. Colons have even fewer rules that govern them than semicolons do, and semicolons had fewer than commas, so we're kind of just making our way down the line with punctuation and punctuation practice this semester. We're going to get right into colons here. So once again, if you haven't done our journal entry yet, if you're doing this virtually, you've got a Schoology discussion to do. I would recommend maybe doing that first before you go into colons practice, but that's up to you. Right now you're working through our colons notes and practice activity, so let's get right to it. We'll get to the other stuff on this agenda in our second video here. I'm going to pull up our colons practice in another window here, just because I haven't uploaded the final document into Schoology yet. I'm going to do some modifying here as I walk you through notes, and then we'll put that in. Once again, no PowerPoint for colons, simply because colons only have a couple of major uses, so I will give those to you here, upload those to Schoology, and then you can work through those last 5 practice questions. So the first rule with colons, the colon, I should say first, is the double dot. So semicolon was the dot above a comma. Colon is a double dot. You might recognize it as the little piece of punctuation that goes between Bible chapters and verses. So for instance, John 3:16. So that's maybe the first thing that comes to mind when you use a colon. There are a couple of grammatical uses of colons as well. For one, we use a colon after a complete sentence to introduce one of two things. You can use it to introduce a quotation, I should say, or you can use it to introduce a list. I'm going to underline those two. So, quotation or a list. My students in class are writing these down, but I get to do them for you. Quotes and lists. Now, you might know that it is possible to introduce a quote with a comma. It is possible to introduce a list with a comma, but colons make it even clearer where quotes or lists begin. Here's an example. Jones states, so here's like a last name. States might imply that this is coming from Jones's article. Bacteria and viruses are fundamentally different organisms, end quote. We're going to look at quotation marks and apostrophes probably next week. But notice we use the colon to introduce the quote. I could just as easily use a comma there, but in sentences that already have lots of commas, colons help to avoid confusion. Another example, this one's for a list. To bake a cake, you will need these ingredients. Now notice, whenever you're introducing a list, your colon must come after a noun, like this. You will need these ingredients. There's a colon indicating what ingredients, what nouns are coming up next. Flour, comma, eggs, comma, sugar, comma, butter, comma, and milk, period. So notice list of 5 items right there. It's coming after that colon. Try this your turn sentence by yourself just before I pop a colon in that sentence. I'm sure you'll identify it pretty quickly here. And there we go. Our sentence is, we lost the following items: a frying pan, 2 tents, and a can of bear spray. Here we know we're introducing a list. The colon goes once again right after the noun items. We lost the following items, colon, a frying pan, 2 tents, and a can of bear spray. The only other major rule for colons, now I should say 90% of colon usage in the English language is used for rule number 1, introducing quotes or lists, especially lists. Once again, if you're going to introduce a list, use it after a noun like ingredients or the following items or something like that. The other 10% of colon use is rule number 2. Use a colon between 2 complete sentences, 2 clauses, if the second one clarifies the first. So for instance, Cynthia can't see the forest for the trees. That's an expression, but we have a complete sentence here. But then we have another clause here, another complete sentence that adds further detail, further explains the first. This isn't just like a second related clause that we would use a semicolon for. It's one that directly clarifies what's going on in the first one. So Cynthia can't see the forest for the trees, colon, that's her major problem. You can always ask these questions backwards. So if my clause says, that's her major problem, it has to answer the question, well, what's her major problem? Her major problem is that she can't see the forest for the trees. Notice, if I was using a semicolon sentence, I'm just going to type one in real quick. I might say something like, this soup is quite hot. I almost said very hot, but word choice, very is better. And hot's quite steamy. There we go. Semicolon. Could you blow it off for me? That's something I have to do for my little toddler girl all the time. So notice this. I could use a semicolon in this context, but I can't use a colon. The soup is quite steamy, colon, could you blow it off for me? And the second one doesn't quite clarify the first part of the sentence. It's a completely separate thought that is related. So once again, semicolons and colons cannot be interchanged in these situations. Use a colon only if it clarifies the first part of the sentence. There is a your turn. See where you would pop a colon in that sentence. We'll go over that together in a moment. And there we go. We simply can't generate any offense, colon. It is why we haven't won yet. That answers our question right there. It clarifies the first. Why haven't we won yet? It's because we can't generate any offense. We're losing games 3-21. There are some do nots, just like there were with semicolons. Colons actually have a bigger propensity to be misused. There are some areas where it's tempting to use one where we shouldn't, so let's walk through those too. Number one, do not put colons after verbs. So between a verb and its complement, just leave it blank. So for instance, you might be tempted to put one here where it says the 3 types of transportation to get to New York are train, car, or airplane. Now, if we were to flip the sentence around, and I said something like this, in New York, or I might say to get around NYC, New York City, use the following types of transportation, then I can use a colon because I'm following it up with a noun right there. But here we have the verb are. Again, after verbs, no need for a colon. The correct way to do this is just to get rid of punctuation entirely. The 3 types of transportation to get around New York are train, car, or airplane. So don't get tricked on that. You do not need punctuation between a verb and its complement or object. You'll also not want to pop colons between a preposition and its object either. So, for instance, I applied to grad schools in, New York, Massachusetts, and Hawaii. Again, no punctuation. We do not want to separate prepositions like in and their objects. In this case, there's 3 objects, New York, Massachusetts, and Hawaii. No punctuation whatsoever. You also do not need a colon after transition words such as including, such as, or for example. A colon does mean the exact same thing as those words, so to use it along with them is redundant. You should know that you can use it as a replacement. So if you find yourself using such as a lot in your writing, a colon actually works as a replacement, just don't do them together. So you might be tempted to say, Cynthia likes fruit including, bananas, apples, and oranges. Again, no need for that colon whatsoever. No punctuation. Cynthia likes fruit, including bananas, apples, and oranges. Cynthia likes fruit, comma, such as bananas, apples, and oranges. Cynthia likes fruit, for example. Actually, for example doesn't work as well here. But in those contexts right there, again, no punctuation after the transition word, or adverb, I suppose I would call it right here. But before bananas, apples, and oranges. Instead of giving you sentences to correct, I gave some ACT style examples here, just because this is what you guys are getting used to on quizzing. We'll walk through the first 5 together, and the second set of 5, that last page, is what I'll have you do on your own. This one is only worth 5 points, so a little bit scaled back this time, but that's because we've got other stuff to do today too. These are not just colon questions. These also cover commas and semicolons too. So that's one reason why I want to walk through the first 5 here. Number 44 says, I like spring, comma, I'm tired of winter. See if you can solve this one on your own. In just a moment, I will give you the answer. For the sake of clarity, I'll be highlighting answers on these. And there we go. So I hope you identified B as the correct answer for 44. Control Alt H is quick highlight, so I'll highlight that real quick. I hope you notice that this is a comma splice. The way to fix comma splices, again, is a semicolon as the lazy way. Don't get tempted to use a colon in this context. The second one doesn't exactly clarify the first right there. Semicolon is better than colon here, which is why I selected B. You may notice that these are pretty similar answers, B and D here. This is just a reminder that on the ACT, you want to select what is best. Number 45, I've dated 3 women, comma, Dana, comma, Alice, comma, and Sandra. That is a lot of commas. There's probably a better way to introduce this list. Take a moment to figure that out on your own, and then I'll highlight my answer. And this one, I hope you identified, is J. Control Alt H. Once again, like I said, better way to introduce the list. As we know from our rule, you can use colons to introduce lists. Take a moment, see if you can answer 46 on your own. I don't need the extra change, colon, you should leave it as a tip. This is another situation where C, the semicolon, is a better answer here. Now, the way that it isn't horrible. It's just that C is a better answer. Number 47, if you want to go fishing, comma, you need the following items, colon, bait, tackle, and hooks. See if you can solve it. And there we go. Best answer for this one is no change. This one has properly used a colon to introduce a list. We do not need to change anything. The issue with J as an answer is that it gets rid of the necessary comma between bait and tackle. So be careful with that one. And number 48, almost all areas on Earth have been explored by modern scientists, semicolon. As a result, comma, they have now begun research on the floors of the sea. Take a moment to do this one on your own before I answer. And this one is also no change. Control H is highlight right there. This one has properly used a conjunctive adverb. So as a result, it goes semicolon, adverb, comma, to continue the clause right there. This one is perfect the way it is. Notice that there is a semicolon in B. What it gets rid of, again, is that necessary comma before they. We do need both for the sentence to work. D is not a horrible answer, but I would also include a comma after result. Again, on the ACT, you have to choose what's best. No change is best. What I want you to work on just for the rest of this is to do these last 5. Again, for this, you're free to highlight or you're free to underline or bold whatever you want your answer to be for each of these. You should know for bolding, it's highlight Control B. Underline is highlight Control U. Highlight is Control Alt H in order to highlight your answer. You can choose whatever you like. But I'm going to go ahead and upload this to Schoology now so that you can answer those questions before the next part of our lesson.